Pleased to have you. So I'll take a moment and introduce you, and we'll have a little bit of fun with this, and then some Q&A on the back end.
Absolutely. Thanks, Joe.
So it's a pleasure to welcome Dr. David Morris. David is an American Association for the Advancement of Science and Technology Policy Fellow. He's been placed in the National Science Foundation's Electromagnetic Spectrum Management Program in the Mathematical and Physical Sciences, or MPS Directorate. Dr. Morris leads workforce development activities in the NSF Spectrum Innovation Initiative, or SII program, with a focus on building comprehensive cross-stakeholder programs to address diversity challenges and to bridge gaps in the spectrum workforce development ecosystem. He works closely with multiple academic, governmental, and industry groups to seek solutions to the challenges of future workforce development in spectrum. He also engages regularly in national and international spectrum regulatory policymaking activities through NSF's roles as a member of the National Telecommunications and Information Agency Interdepartmental Radio Advisory Committee and the United Nations International Telecommunications Union Radio Communications Sector. Dr. Morris comes to NSF as an AAS STP fellow from his position at the University of Virgin Islands, where he is a high-energy astrophysicist and associate professor of physics. He's also director of UVI's Edelman Observatory, which is used for the study of optical afterglows of astrophysical transients, including supernova and gravitational wave sources. He developed UVI's BS degree, Bachelor's of Science degree in physics, and has recently helped to expand UVI's physics program to include a new concentration in engineering. His UVI research team concentrates on developing high-impact, hands-on research activities to engage students from diverse backgrounds in STEM, and he works closely with the community to build workforce development pathways to local technical employers, including governmental agencies and private industry. He's passionate about student engagement in interdisciplinary research, and he works across departments and research centers at his university. It's a pleasure to welcome you here, David, and we look forward to hearing your observations.
Thank you so much, Joe. That was a really fantastic introduction. Really appreciate all those kind words and a bit of acronym soup in there. So I apologize for that. But for those of you who maybe aren't familiar with all the sort of letters that were just thrown in there in the bio, I hope to address some of that today. I want to talk a little bit about the organization of the National Science Foundation and how we do the spectrum management activities that we do. So I want to start this morning by just thanking Joe and the NSMA for inviting me to come here today and share some of that perspective with you on federal government spectrum needs, in particular the National Science Foundation's needs, and what we're looking to do to support the country's needs in spectrum. As Joe mentioned, I am an American Association for the Advancement of Science, Science and Technology Policy Fellow. So I've been at NSF for the last almost 2 years in their spectrum management group. My background is in astrophysics. My full-time job is as a physics professor. As Joe mentioned, I've got a real passion for developing workforce development. It's a key issue in the region where my university is, in the Virgin Islands, developing a technical workforce. And I've taken some of that to this position at NSF, thinking about how to address what we've heard from the community about the real need for producing not only more spectrum managers, but spectrum managers with a diverse set of skills that really address the needs of the different sectors that do spectrum management. So for the last better part of the last 2 years, I've been at NSF working in the spectrum management group, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about the organization of spectrum management activities within NSF, and then I'll focus towards the end on specifically workforce development activities that I've been working on, and perhaps how the NSMA can get involved. And I really need to say that I'm going to be giving this presentation today, but of course, this work is given on behalf of a much larger group of researchers and scientists at NSF, really excellent group of spectrum professionals and scientists that I've had the pleasure of working with over the last 2 years. So let me go ahead and get started. Here's the roadmap that we're going to cover today. So I'm going to briefly introduce that excellent team that I work with that I just mentioned, and I'll describe a little bit about where the Spectrum Management Group sits within the overall structure of NSF. I'll talk a little bit about the Spectrum Management Group and what we do at NSF, starting with a discussion of those coordination activities that we participate in that Joe was mentioning. We'll talk a little bit about what NSF is generally known for, that's funding cutting edge research and how we do that in Spectrum. We'll talk specifically about my focus area in workforce development, and I'll close out with some thoughts on ways that those of you in the audience might be able to consider getting involved with programs that you're going to hear about today or others that NSF will make available in the future. I can get to my next slide. Okay, so the team organization. Our NSF ESM team is housed within the Astronomical Sciences Division. That's in the Mathematical Physical Sciences Directorate that Joe mentioned at the top. In case you're not familiar with NSF's overall structure, NSF has 8 directorates, and it's now 8 directorates. That's basically the top level distinction between scientific interest areas at NSF. And those areas are biological sciences, computer and information science and engineering, engineering, education, human resources, geosciences, mathematical and physical sciences, where ESM sits, the social, behavioral, and economic sciences, and then the newest directorate is the Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships Directorate, just started this year. So as I mentioned, our ESM core team, shown here, we sit in the MPS directorate. Many of you might recognize the top 3 folks in my little rogues gallery here: Jonathan Williams, Ashley Vanderlei, and John Chapin. They've been active in spectrum policy and research for many years, either at NSF, in Jonathan and Ashley's case, or in DARPA and elsewhere in John's case. If you don't recognize me, that's okay. I've told you why that is. I'm not coming from a spectrum background. And Lisa Winter is a program director in the Geoscience Directorate, and she's been spinning up her activity in Spectrum at NSF over the last year or so. So the ESM, as I mentioned, is inside the MPS, the Mathematical and Physical Sciences Directorate, and that's due to essentially historical reasons. For decades, NSF has advocated for access to key frequency bands for particularly astronomical sciences in radio astronomy. But the modern role of the Spectrum Management Group at NSF has really become highly cross-directorate with regular input from really now all directorates at NSF, including that brand new one, TIP. And to help coordinate those interests across NSF, a cross-directorate Spectrum Management Coordination Group was established just recently, well, in 2018. And you can see the representation to that coordination group from all the directorates across NSF shown here. Jonathan Williams is from our core team, is the chair of that coordination group. And we meet roughly monthly to share ideas and provide input from all the directorates and coordinate NSF funded spectrum related work. And that, I should say that contact, that coordination goes all the way to the top of NSF. You can see at the bottom of my slide here, the Office of the Director also has a seat on that coordination group in the person of Linnea Avalone, who is our Chief Officer for Research Facilities. And she's actually replacing just this year the past Chief Officer for Research Facilities, Jim Olvestad, who in fact started the entire ESM management group at NSF. So the need for that coordinating body is maybe obvious to this group, but just in terms of NSF, it's due to the fact that spectrum impacts really all directorates at NSF now. Maybe at one point it was primarily radio astronomy decades ago, but now really every one of the directorates in NSF has either use cases for spectrum or in fact is doing cutting edge research in spectrum. So in the geosciences case, there are CubeSat remote sensing stations and down-looking Earth remote sensing satellite stations that need access to spectrum to do their research. Biology is increasingly making use of remote sensing for ecological and biosphere monitoring. The computer and information sciences and engineering, of course, are advancing wireless communications technology itself and pushing for greater access to communications networks for the entire country. The social and behavioral and economic sciences has made Nobel Prize winning contributions to spectrum auctions and auction theory. And then EHR, the Education and Human Resources Director, of course, provides the pathways for the future workforce to gain the skills that they need and to get really energized about future careers in spectrum, something that I know this community is really interested in supporting. Now, beyond the need for NSF's internal coordination, the Spectrum Management Group at NSF also coordinates with other US federal agencies outside of NSF, including NOAA, NASA, Department of Energy, and others. And we coordinate on spectrum-related matters. And that could include both technical issues like coordinating responses to new requested filings for spectrum use, but it also includes discussing issues related to education and workforce development. NASA, in fact, has recently kicked off a great series of government stakeholder meetings on spectrum workforce challenges. And that's really gotten great input from government stakeholders, including DoD. We're really excited about being a part of that at NSF. And at the national policy level, NSF engages regularly with NTIA and the FCC to make sure that the funding activities NSF puts forward align with the nation's spectrum policy goals, right? And in particular, we want to support US leadership in NextG, but we also keep an eye, we're kind of on both sides of the coin there. We want to push forward leadership in NextG, but on the other side, we're also making sure that we preserve access to key spectrum bands for the passive sciences, earth science and astrophysics. So NSF's collaboration with FCC also is seen in areas like the FCC innovation zones, which you might be familiar with, the power project with power test beds at New York and Colorado, and that's Powder and Cosmos, and then I think AirPaw is in North Carolina. And then the NSF, of course, provides funding for the Power Project Office. And NSF's goal in all of these interactions with the federal regulatory agencies is always to work closely to try to sort of defuse problems before they happen, right? We receive filings and look for issues that might be of concern to the scientific community and try to find solutions before before that really becomes a problem at a national level. And then NSF, again, as Joe mentioned, is formally involved in the IRAC process, and we attend and provide regular input to 11 IRAC subcommittees, including RCS, FAS, SPS, PPSG. I think the FAS maybe had a meeting just this morning. Internationally, our Spectrum Management Group also participates in the World Radio Communication Conferences cycle. And we provide representation both to the official US delegation to CTEL, that's the Inter-American Telecommunications Commission, the sort of regional body that does regulation in the Americas. And then also we participate in the International Telecommunications Union radio communication sector. NSF, in fact, participates in several working parties in ITUR, primarily in the working parties 5 and 7. And we just, in fact, finished up a cycle where the NSF Spectrum Management Group led the working party 7D, that's the radio astronomy working party, if you're not familiar, led that working party. And they've been doing that, in fact, the delegation, leading that delegation for the last several ITUR working party cycles. So let me transition now to talk a little bit about NSF's perhaps best known role, and that's as a funder of innovative science and technology. So the NSF has funded research and development in spectrum related areas for a long time, but the portfolio of activities that I'm going to talk about today was grouped together and reorganized with the launch of something that we're calling the Spectrum Innovation Initiative back in May of 2020. And the SII is built on these 4 pillars that you can see here, and I'll describe those in a little bit more detail in a minute, but they're the National Radiodynamic Zones, the National Center for Wireless Spectrum Research, spectrum research integrative activities, that's sort of cross-directorate spectrum research in NSF, and then education and workforce development. And I'd like to just kind of reiterate at this point that that whole structure is overseen by this cross-directorate coordination group. In addition, it draws on subject matter expertise from the FCC and the NTIA, and that relationship is enabled through a memorandum of agreement that we signed with NSF signed with NTIA and FCC back in 2021. So the first, let me talk in a little more detail now about these each of these four pillars. So the first pillar is the National Science Foundation's National Center for Wireless Spectrum Research. And this program aims to bring together groups of multidisciplinary scientists, engineers, and educators, as well as policy experts from multiple sectors, including academia, federal labs, and industry, to address nationwide challenges in wireless spectrum research. That's the charge. In addition to doing cutting-edge research in technical areas, the centers also expect to address challenges in developing and diversifying the future spectrum workforce. And in addition, it also is asked to serve as a hub for spectrum researchers and to be a clearinghouse for spectrum research results. And the hope there is that provide a center that can help improve communication and sort of reduce friction, break down silos, so that researchers in the government sector and the academic sector and the industrial sector can be a little bit more current on what each other are doing and move the ball forward a little bit more quickly by leveraging one another's results. The first center that is stood up under this program is known as Spectrum X, and it's led by a research team from the University of Notre Dame. Spectrum X team, you can see, is a truly cross-national, cross-sector group. It's composed of 29 academic institutions that you can see on the map that I'm showing you here. That includes 12 minority serving institutions. They span the country, as you can see, from California all the way to the Caribbean. And it also includes federal labs and industrial partners across the country as well. And this geographic and demographic diversity is really important because it helps the center address that charge of being a truly national hub for spectrum research, not just regional application as oftentimes universities may be. In addition, in addition to that geographic and demographic diversity, there's also technical diversity, as you can see on this slide. The Spectrum X team has expertise in telecommunications and passive science, radio and antenna technology, but also policy economics, data science, and much more. So some of the initial thrusts in the technical side and the workforce development side, you can see here on this slide, and those kind of the initial projects that Spectrum X is trying to get started on. It was just launched in September of 2021, so really less than a year old now. So they're really spinning up a lot of these programs, but we're excited about the progress they've already made. And it's important to note that NSF envisions that the Spectrum X Center and any future centers that are stood up under this program are going to be national lasting resources that'll persist and grow into national research centers that last beyond that 5-year, I maybe haven't said this yet, but it's a 5-year, $25 million commitment from NSF, but we anticipate that these centers will last beyond that. Now to realize that, and this is perhaps really important for this audience, to realize that lasting value and to stand these centers up and have them persist is really going to require engagement and participation by the nation's spectrum professional community in the work that Spectrum X or other centers will do, and adoption of the resources and community that these centers develop. So if you'd like to learn more about Spectrum X, their team, their research, their workforce development activities, community development, you can connect with them through the link that I have here on my slide. And I think these slides will be available, so you'll have these. You don't need to scribble notes down as we go. The second pillar that I'd like to talk to you about is the multi-directorate spectrum research integrative activities. So while that national center program I just told you about is relatively new, the first one was stood up last year, NSF cross-directorate programs have been supporting research and development in improving efficient usage of the spectrum for at least 10 years and surely more. but I'm showing you sort of programs that span the last 10 years here. Some of these programs the audience might be familiar with, going all the way back to the EARS program in 2012 that led to the SPEC-Ease program and ML Wins, and our sort of current flagship program in SRIA is called Swift. And the solicitation for Swift, in fact, just closed, and some of the audience might, in fact, be involved in proposals on those. That program, the Swift program, has been around for a few years already, and there are 41 active projects. You can see some of the examples of research topics supported by these activities here. The projects are ongoing, and they provide a real important opportunity for engagement with the spectrum management community through something known as NSF supplemental proposals. So if you're not familiar with that idea, the notion here is that these research projects that I'm showing you, the core funded component, of course, is the science and engineering research and development topic. Some of them shown here, but there are multiple avenues for industry involvement with these programs as well. For example, through the NSF intern program, which is a program that provides funding to graduate students to do work at for-profit labs, startup companies, policy think tanks, nonprofit organizations, and this program and others are often advertised through what NSF calls Dear Colleague letters, or DCLs. And the DCL I just mentioned about this NSF intern program, which could be of interest to some in the audience, the link for that is shown here at the bottom of my slide. You can also do sort of a broader search with that little search I have done in the footnotes here. That would just give you a search of all the active DCLs at NSF. So if you're interested in sort of browsing activities that you might or your company might be interested in being involved in, you can use that link there. So the third pillar that I'd like to talk to you about from the SAI is a new initiative, and that's currently accepting proposals right now, and that's known as the SII National Radio Dynamic Zones Program, or SII NERDS. The SII NERDS aims to establish geographically defined zones to provide test beds that will allow at-scale field trials for future dynamic spectrum sharing solutions. We envision that the spectrum sharing solutions that are not maybe able to be deployed currently in traditionally regulated spaces will be able to be tested in real-world deployments, not in lab, but out in the open in these SII NERDS. And here's the idea. If you're familiar with the idea of, or if you're familiar with the existing National Radio Quiet Zone that's down on the border between Virginia and West Virginia, and it surrounds the Green Bank Observatory and its Green Bank Radio Telescope. It's the largest steerable, fully steerable radio telescope in the world. That radio quiet zone, inside the radio quiet zone, most omnidirectional radio transmissions, as you're all surely aware, are prohibited. Those that are allowed have to follow strict limits on power and antenna parameters. And that's, of course, all designed to protect the sensitive radio receivers that are within the zone from being interfered with from radiation outside the zone. So in the concept of a radio dynamic zone, we kind of flip that. We define, once again, a geographic area or a volume, but this time the electromagnetic energy radiated inside the zone has to be designed or can be designed to test new and potentially unproven spectrum sharing techniques, as long as the emissions inside the zone don't adversely affect regions or operators or customers outside the zone. And then the emissions within the zone will be carefully measured and monitored to make sure that they meet regulated limits outside the zone. So we're really excited about that. Solicitation is open now. We've been taking there have been pilot investments in NERDS dating back to 2020, but the current solicitation is the first full proposal. It's taking, or first call for full proposals, and it's open through June 21st. Takes takes proposals from institutions of higher education, as well as nonprofit, non-academic organizations, including national labs, professional societies, and others. And for more information, once again, you can follow the link that I have here that'll take you to the solicitation for that program. Okay, and now in the time that we have left, I'd like to shift focus to talk a little more about the fourth and final pillar of the SII, which is sort of my focus area, spectrum workforce development. So many of the research programs that I've already talked about, including that National Center and the NERDS program, those have within them associated education and workforce development pieces. You heard me talk about the SII Center, the National Center, has as its charge doing workforce development. But the workforce development need and spectrum, as we've heard from several speakers in the last couple of days, is really multifaceted, and it goes beyond any single technical area or even technical areas in general, right? There's also policy and economics issues to be dealt with. So it really goes beyond what any single project might hope to accomplish. So specifically, our goals, our broad goals in education and workforce development at NSF include the ones that I have here, specifically supporting U.S. academic, federal, and industrial spectrum sectors to continue being a world leader in next-G technology. We seek to innovate or accelerate innovation in spectrum management and capabilities and spectrum science. We seek to strengthen the U.S. Industrial capability in spectrum. We want to reduce friction and increase cooperation and collaboration across all the stakeholders that have interest in spectrum: government, academic, industrial. We want to provide opportunities for career retooling and retraining so that the current workforce can remain current with advances in spectrum technology. And of course, we really need to ensure that the spectrum management pipeline engages the workforce pipeline really engages the full diversity of the US talent base, critically important. So one of the ways that we're seeking to do this is by reaching out to collaborate with the spectrum community by establishing partnerships and collaborations with academic institutions, government labs, and industry partners. And the goal there is to support training opportunities for spectrum professionals at all career stages, from pre-college all the way through retraining of mid-career professionals. We've been connecting recently with, we've been focusing recently on connecting with federal labs, NASA, NIST, and NTIA. We've got sort of nascent programs in place with, and we're developing arrangements that allow NSF-funded researchers to be placed at these federal spectrum labs that in many cases have resources that can't be found anywhere else in the country, to do real cutting-edge research and advance those people's careers, those professionals' careers. We're motivated to establish similar agreements with industrial research labs. We haven't gotten there yet, but we'd really love to do that. And those kinds of agreements could allow NSF to list, for example, industrial labs on internship and postdoctoral fellowship opportunities, the VCLs and the solicitations that you heard me talking about. We can put named labs in there, and that helps to foster an opportunity for NSF-funded researchers to end up at those labs doing real cutting-edge research and supporting those companies' labs. And I've also touched earlier in this talk on several DCL opportunities, dear colleague letter opportunities, that could interest the members of the audience today, and might be able to provide similar opportunities for NSF-funded researchers to be placed at maybe your lab or your company's lab. So really encourage you to check out those opportunities and certainly reach out if you have any questions on those. Then in addition to the focused activities in workforce development associated with the specific solicitations and invitations through past or current DCLs that I've been talking about, in addition, that spectrum management team at NSF recognizes that there are broader challenges in spectrum workforce development, and some of these have been touched on by others in talks yesterday. For example, about the curriculum development or the curriculum that exists and where curriculum gaps exist. I had a great talk yesterday by INART about some of their programs for certification. But some of the goals, some of the broader goals that NSF has for workforce development are shown here. One of those broad goals is to establish a state of the field survey. That is to say that we hear a lot from government stakeholders, academic research groups, government groups mostly, that the spectrum workforce demands are currently outpacing the production of qualified spectrum professionals. I've heard that in this meeting as well. Especially professionals that can kind of bridge that space between multiple disciplines, including technical understanding and engineering acumen, but also having regulation and policy knowledge and appreciation of economic and public pressures, all of which are inherent in being a excellent spectrum manager. So it seemed clear that programs are needed to address this perceived underproduction of highly qualified spectrum professionals. But in most cases that we've heard from agencies, it's still unclear who comprises that spectrum professional workforce from agency to agency or company to company. So a field-wide survey on the workforce composition and personnel demands, I think, is really sorely needed. Now, Spectrum X has made some progress in this area. They have a survey instrument they've deployed to academic groups, and they're now sort of modifying it and deploying it within the government stakeholder community. Input from this body, from NSMA and the members of this audience and industry would be incredibly important and valuable in this area as well. In addition, NSF has a long history of standing workforce development programs, some that people in the audience might have even participated in when you were in college. Things like the Research Experience for Undergraduates program, been around for years. Graduate Research Fellowship program, also around for years. And we'd love to activate these programs to support specifically spectrum professional development. Could be really effective. The challenge is that there's a lot of coordination required to do that, right? We need to raise awareness of the need for specific tracks, for example, within NSF for these workforce development programs to apply to spectrum professionals. You know, oftentimes spectrum professionals are retooling. Perhaps a electrical engineer from mid-career is picking up policy and regulatory understanding to move into a spectrum career, right? Or vice versa. You have legal and policy personnel who are picking up technical training to really move into or advance in a spectrum career. So that implies that these programs, which, you know, NSF standing programs, which are traditionally aimed at, you know, college level students without families, you know, without obligations, to make those really fit the spectrum community might need some retooling. Might mean that you know, the structure and financial resources provided to those programs might need to look different to address the spectrum management community. So we're looking hard at that. And then also outside NSF, in order to make these programs work, we really need to engage with the government and industry employers of spectrum professionals to make sure that we're developing pathways that can lead to future jobs, not just train people and have them go elsewhere. We want to train them and really have that lead to you know, pathway placement within that agency or within that company. And then finally, NSF recognizes that there are existing workforce development activities that are spectrum relevant at other agencies, right? NIST, NASA, DOE, NTIA, FCC, and more that I'm probably not remembering. They've all got summer research programs of their own. Many have graduate research opportunities, and some even have pathway programs like I was just describing that all aim to connect future employees into specific jobs at those agencies. And they're deployed sometimes for spectrum research professionals, but oftentimes those traineeships end up just giving skills to trainees that end up taking jobs elsewhere. You know, in spectrum, we often see that they go off and take positions in, you know, some other field, AI or cybersecurity or telecom. So real coordination between the agencies and NSF is critical to make these programs actually train trainees who end up taking positions in the agency, and we're focused on doing that. So finally, just a couple of words before I take questions on perhaps ways for those of you in the audience today to engage in some of these programs you've been hearing about, or engage in general with the NSF spectrum management community, the spectrum management activities. So one way that the NSMA itself, this association, could consider engaging with the NSF could be to stand up a working group on spectrum education workforce development. That would be fantastic. You've heard earlier about some of the funding mechanisms available from NSF. So there are potentially resources too that could be committed to such an effort. And the NSMA could provide unique perspective, I think, from the professional spectrum management community regarding the workforce composition, industry needs, available curriculum and curriculum gaps, what's really required in curriculum to make a good spectrum manager. And a report out of such a working group would be incredibly valuable, not just to NSF, but to Spectrum X and to others seeking to establish their own workforce pipeline programs. And moreover, if you or your company, you could also consider facilitating a survey of your own with your company to address their needs. I mentioned earlier that Spectrum X has a survey instrument that they've been developing, and that could be adapted to fit industry as opposed to government or academia. And we at NSF would be happy to hear from anyone that would like to do that. We'd be excited to help connect you to Spectrum X to get that done. Another concrete activity could be for the NSMA to stand up or to build a jobs board that could live on the NSMA webpage. Lots of professional societies, as I'm sure you're all well aware, like the American Physical Society, the IEEE, AAS, that's the American Astronomical Society, my professional society. They all have jobs boards, and some of those, all those ones I just listed, in fact, sometimes have Spectrum-related job postings. But of course, the NSMA would be a focused repository for opportunities of interest to all Spectrum professionals, as opposed to just kind of one-offs from some of these other professional communities. And certainly I noticed yesterday during the INART talk that INART has a jobs board. And I'd love to hear more about how opportunities make it to that jobs board, how they get posted there, and who accesses who accesses those jobs, and how successful it is in doing some of that matching, employment matching. And finally, NSF would be really excited to help enable greater and more open communication between academia, government, Spectrum community, and the industrial Spectrum professional community. Spectrum X, as I've mentioned earlier, has that as part of its center charge to be a convener and to help bring together Spectrum researchers from all sectors. And their first effort in this area, they're calling Radio Shop Chats. These are sort of master classes on Spectrum held generally on Mondays so far at 4:30 Eastern. There have been 2 so far. They've both been really fantastic. Roger Nichols from Keysight Technologies and Elliot Eichen from UC Boulder gave great talks. So you can visit Spectrum X website shown here and see their calendar of upcoming events. And then going in the other direction, it would be really great, I think, for the academic community to have more presence at professional Spectrum management meetings like this one, right? The Spectrum X and other NSF Spectrum research programs could really gain a lot of valuable insight by having attendees at these conferences. So I'd love to share opportunities from NSMA with Spectrum X to share with their, with their mailing lists and their community of researchers, as well as reach out to PIs of other research programs that I've talked about at NSF as well. Engagement is really key. Would love to see more cross-sector engagements by our Spectrum professionals. And then finally, to close, it's really been my absolute pleasure to get to update all of you today on the work that NSF is doing in Spectrum. And I hope we'll be able to come back and do this again and find opportunities in the future to keep this group updated on developments in Spectrum research and Spectrum workforce development that NSF is working on, things that I've been talking to you about today. So once again, just want to express my great appreciation to Joe. Thank you so much, and NSMA, for making time in the schedule today to hear more about NSF's work. And I think this would be a great time to move on to taking questions and discussing Spectrum workforce development. Thank you so much.
Great, David. Yeah, thank you for that very nutritious overview. Quite a lot going there and a lot to think about, and appreciate the recommendations as well. More interaction is useful, I think, for it's a win-win for sure. So if we can work towards that, all the better. High level, I was curious in terms of, have you identified numbers of Spectrum managers that, we have X in the country today and we'd like X plus Y? Do we have that?
Yeah.
Sifted?
Yeah, it's a great question. That the short answer is no. I'm always interested at meetings like this to hear the numbers that people have from their particular sectors. But the honest answer is no, right? When we bring this up, we have brought this up over the last year and a half with NASA and NIST and NOAA and academic agencies or academic research labs. And people can list who are their spectrum managers, right? They can list the person whose job title is spectrum manager. But the challenge, as I was talking about, is that it's much broader than that. The sort of docket of jobs that have some level of spectrum management or spectrum professional training required to do them is much broader than just people called spectrum managers, right? The one group that's really done a good job of this, and some of you might be familiar with this, is the DoD. The DoD has spent sort of the last 2 years doing a thorough review of all of the billets in the 5 forces that have some element of spectrum management within them, and the need for some element of spectrum training. And if I remember my numbers right, they came up with something like, when I kind of worked out the numbers, there was something like 3% of their entire employed workforce had some level of need for some level of training in spectrum professionalism. Now, that could just be like really basic course in how radios operate and how to stand up communication stations in the field, all the way up to the sort of cutting edge guys working on next generation jamming techniques at DARPA, right? But all of those people put together, they came up with a number of roughly 3%. So if you kind of span that out across the country, that's millions of people, right? If you maybe DoD is kind of overweighted in terms of spectrum professionals. They do a lot of communications, obviously, but the whole country does a lot of communications. So if that's kind of the only broad number I've got to work with right now, but that's why we're so interested in getting, even if it's just at the individual company level, we'd love to have someone take on the mantle of going out and doing a similar kind of survey of their own workforce and find out from the lowest level to the highest level of engagement who really needs, who could benefit from some kind of spectrum professional training.
Yeah, that's very helpful information. Yeah, and we also had a similar discussion, with Tom Fagan and Arte. He had mentioned he since they put up and launched in 2019 their program for certified spectrum managers, they trained roughly 400 and roughly 10 a week, I believe. I mentioned to him that we have, in terms of, let's say, our LinkedIn group membership, over 750 and counting. In that, not that they're 100% spectrum managers, but a large majority are, and they might fall under that DoD category. They're all somewhat interested, right? And there's probably many other, the whole FCC staff, or at least maybe not the whole, there's some wireline folks there, but a lot of wireless bureau and OET people, and NTIA and their offices of spectrum policy, and we could go down the list. Yeah, there's quite a bit out there.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And again, the obviously the audience here today are really deep invested spectrum professionals, right? But I imagine, and I don't know if this is true, but I would imagine that if I saw the audience right now, there's probably not a lot of 18, 20, and 22-year-olds in the audience, right? It's mostly people that are well into their careers and have found their way deep into spectrum management professionalism. But there are, as I was talking about, the DoD finds that there's really a need for training at all different levels, right? So that's one of the things that, the thing that NSF can really address is those, the thing that NSF is immediately set up to address is those early career professionals, developing pathways to get those 18, 20, and 22-year-olds not to go to careers as a double E at NASA, but to go to careers as a spectrum manager, right? And go to work in deploying 5G or developing 6G. So that's where we can, I think, really make an impact. But again, these programs aren't really tuned for doing spectrum professional development because, we just haven't addressed it previously. So really excited to think and would love to hear from the community about, how we can tune programs that are standing to maybe make them a little bit more effective for training a spectrum workforce.
Yeah, there are young, like the Federal Communications Bar Association has a young lawyers committee, and we could probably have a young spectrum managers committee or something to that effect. There is a comment/question from one of our board members, Renee Leduc. She says, "Thanks for the informative talk. I work closely with the atmospheric science community on these topics and appreciate NSF's efforts. When is your AAAS fellowship ending?" And your activities have been very important.
Yeah, Yeah, I'm very sad that my time comes to an end at the end of August. But the great news is that the spectrum management group in NSF is growing. Is the first great news, right? Some of you might know that John Chapin, who I had in my sort of original Rogues Gallery, he joined us just a year ago. In fact, he's newer to the spectrum management group than I am, but that's a new position that is expected to persist in NSF. So the spectrum management group is growing both in its core and its reach across NSF. The group specifically has also asked for a new AAAS fellow. So I hope we'll be able to transition some of this workforce development work that I've been doing and keep it moving with another fellow. It will be really exciting to see.
Excellent. Well, pleasure to have you. We appreciate your time here and look forward to further engagement with you and your colleagues as appropriate. And yeah, as far as we can tell on all, any measure we can find, there's a greater and greater need for spectrum management. So appreciate what you do. And thanks for being here. And hopefully,
thanks so much, Joe.
Okay. And we'll probably hear from Mariana Verlage Archibald. I think she might be joining here or on another. Oh, there she is. Okay. She's gonna give us some guidance. So.
Hi, everyone. I will be sharing a prepared NSMA string of videos. I believe when I shared it yesterday, we had some technical issues. So I'll be sharing that again as we go into our lunch break. Gives you some information on NSMA, has some trivia questions. It should be pretty fun, but we are breaking for lunch. Thank you so much, David, for your presentation. And we'll see you back here let me get my schedule, at 1 p.m. Eastern for our next presentation on spectrum modernization with Art Deleon. So y'all, please tell me in the chat if you can't see the video this time, but hopefully it'll work the second time around. So thank you to everyone and have a great lunch break.
The National Spectrum Management Association, or NSMA, is a voluntary international association of microwave, radio, wireless, and satellite frequency coordinators, licensees, operators, manufacturers, and regulators. Established in 1984 at the request of the Federal Communications Commission, or FCC, the association provides a forum to develop industry guidelines for efficient use and management of the frequency spectrum by the wireless telecommunications community. NSMA provides a linkage between government regulations and industry practice by developing recommendations that streamline and standardize procedures used by the frequency coordination community. We strive to provide an open forum for stakeholders to mold responsible spectrum industry practice and resolve conflicts. If you know someone who should be a member, reach out and invite them to join. You can find us on our website, nsma.org, www.nsma.org, or find us on LinkedIn or Facebook. Thank you. Hello everyone, this is your NSMA President, Joe Sandry. I'd like to welcome everyone to our 37th annual conference. Although we're still meeting virtual, we continue to remain connected throughout our world of technology, and we're excited to present to you over the next 2 days this series of industry-leading talks and panels. Stay tuned to see the schedule. Enjoy the conference.
Hello and welcome to the National Spectrum Management Association home webpage, where we provide leadership and guidance on today's critical spectrum management issues. Check in on nsma.org from time to time to see the latest developments and events. We have kept our conferences over the years carefully recorded in PDFs, and other archive materials can be found here at the bottom right-hand corner where you've previously seen other conference presentations. We would highly encourage you to look at them. There's a whole Trojan of materials on a variety of subjects. You can also learn more about our memberships here on our membership page at NSMA. You can become a member or renew your membership. On our sponsor page, you can learn more about sponsorship opportunities with the NSMA. We'd love to have you as a sponsor, so think about it. Here at the NSMA, we are always open on our webpage, so come visit us at www.nsma.org. If you have any questions, email us at info@nsma.org. Thank you.